"We are all your children." A little girl told a millionaire visiting his son's grave. Then something terrible happened. Comment what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10 and tell me which city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The cemetery gate creaked as Arthur Morgan pushed the heavy wrought iron structure, just as he had every morning for exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 15 days. His steps echoed in the morning silence as he walked the path of uneven stones he knew by heart, every curve and every tree etched into his memory like scars that would never fully heal. At 52, Arthur carried on his shoulders the weight of an empire built with his own hands and the pain of having lost its meaning just as quickly. Morgan Agricultural Equipment had dominated the market in Cedar Creek for decades, supplying machinery to farms throughout America's heartland. But financial success had become just empty numbers in a bank account that couldn't buy back what truly mattered. The white marble grave stood out among the other tombs, adorned with fresh flowers. He brought himself weakly. "Peter Morgan," read the golden inscription, followed by dates that marked a life cut short at 15. Arthur knelt before the headstone, as he always did, and began to speak softly to the son who would never answer again. "Good morning, my boy. I brought your favorite flowers today, those daisies you used to pick in Grandma's yard." His voice trembled slightly, even after all these years of one-sided conversations. "The company is doing well, as always. Beatrice is still handling the administrative side, but you know how she is. Always worried about numbers and more numbers." The morning wind blew through the cypress trees, carrying the scent of flowers and the characteristic humidity of the Midwestern plains. Arthur closed his eyes and tried, as he did every day, to remember the sound of Peter's laughter, the way he would run through the company office during school vacations, touching everything and asking questions about every machine he saw in the catalogs. It was then that he heard a small, clear voice. "Did you also lose someone you loved very much?" Arthur opened his eyes abruptly and turned. Before him stood a girl of about 4, too thin for her age, with disheveled brown hair and clothes that were clearly not her own, an adult t-shirt tied at the waist and shorts that were far too large, held in place by a piece of twine. Her brown eyes had a strange depth for someone so young, as if they had seen things a child shouldn't know. "Who are you, little one?" Arthur asked, surprised to find someone in the cemetery so early. "Where are your parents?" The girl didn't answer immediately. Instead, she came closer and looked at Peter's headstone. "Was he your son?" Her voice had a softness that contrasted with the evident hardship of her situation. "He was, yes, Peter was. Is my son." Arthur still struggled with tenses when talking about the boy. "And you? What's your name?" "Amelia." She pointed behind her, where 3 small figures were sitting near an old mausoleum. "Those are my siblings, David, Laura, and baby Jude." Arthur looked in the direction she indicated and felt a tightness in his chest. A boy who looked about 3 was holding a baby who couldn't be more than 8 months old, while an even smaller girl, perhaps 2, was huddled beside them. They all wore clothes in similar condition to Amelia's, clearly found or donated, and had that characteristic thinness of someone who hasn't eaten properly for a long time. "Do you live here?" Arthur asked. Though the answer was obvious from the children's appearance. "We stay around here. The people who come to visit the dead sometimes give us food or money." Amelia spoke without self-pity, just stating a fact of her life. "But you come every day, and you've never seen us before." It was true. Arthur was always so absorbed in his grief that he had never paid attention to what was happening around him in the cemetery. "How long have you been here?" "I can't count very well yet, but it's been a long time, since our mother... since she went away." Amelia hesitated, as if carefully choosing her words. Arthur felt a strange familiarity looking at the girl. There was something in her gestures, in the way she tilted her head when she spoke, that brought back vague memories of someone he couldn't clearly identify. It was like looking through a foggy glass at a memory that refused to take shape. "And your father? Where is he?" "We never had a father. Our mother said he was a good man, but that he didn't know we existed." Amelia moved closer to Peter's headstone. She used to tell stories about him before we went to sleep. She said one day we would meet him. Arthur's heart inexplicably sped up. There was something deeply unsettling about this conversation, a feeling that pieces of a puzzle he didn't even know existed were being laid before him. "What was this story your mother used to tell?" Amelia smiled for the first time, a shy but genuine smile. "She said our father had a big company, that he helped people in the countryside with special machines, that he was kind, and that if we ever needed him badly, we should look for him in the place where people go to talk to those they love but can no longer hug." The description hit Arthur like a lightning bolt. Agricultural machinery company, visits to the cemetery. It was too specific to be a coincidence, but too impossible to be true. He looked at Amelia again, searching for familiar features in her small, dirty face. "What was your mother's name?" "Claire. Claire Stevens." Amelia's answer made Arthur's world stop. Claire, his wife, who had passed away 3 years ago, just a few months after Peter's accident. Claire, who had always been mysterious about her past before their marriage. Claire, who had that same way of tilting her head when she was thoughtful. "This can't be happening," Arthur murmured, more to himself than to the girl. "Did you know our mother?" Amelia asked, her eyes filling with cautious hope. Arthur couldn't answer immediately. His legs gave way, and he leaned on Peter's headstone, trying to process the impossible. If these children were telling the truth, if Claire was really their mother, it meant his wife had hidden from him not just a past, but 4 children. "Sir," Amelia insisted, "are you okay?" It was at that moment that she did something that made Arthur's blood run cold. She reached out her right hand to touch his arm in a comforting gesture, revealing a small but distinctive scar on her wrist in the shape of a crescent moon. Arthur knew that scar. He had kissed that same mark hundreds of times on Claire's wrist, who always said she had hurt herself as a child playing in her backyard. The world began to spin around Arthur. The physical resemblances, the mother's story, the identical scar. Everything pointed to a truth his mind refused to accept. When he managed to find his voice again, the words came out as a hoarse whisper. Are you Claire's children?" Amelia's silent confirmation hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. The girl simply nodded, her large eyes fixed on his face, waiting for a reaction he didn't know how to give. The cemetery around them seemed to have disappeared, leaving only that small group in the center of a whirlwind of impossible emotions to process. How is this possible?" Arthur muttered, still holding onto Peter's headstone to keep from falling. "Claire never told me. She never mentioned." "Our mother said you didn't know about us," said Amelia, moving closer. "She said that when she had us, you didn't know each other yet, that she had to take care of us alone because she didn't know how to find you." Arthur tried to do the math in his head. Amelia looked to be 4, which meant she was born about 5 years ago. He had met Claire 8 years ago, married her 6 years ago. If the timeline was right, it was technically possible she had children before him. But why hide it? Why lie during all those years of marriage? "Where were you living before you came here?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm despite the internal chaos. "In different places," A lady took care of us in a big place with lots of other kids, but then she said she couldn't anymore. Then we stayed with a family for a while, but they also said it wasn't possible anymore. Amelia spoke with the cruel naturalness of a child accustomed to rejection. Our mother visited sometimes, but she was always very sad and said that soon, very soon, she would come get us. And when was the last time you saw your mother? A long time ago. She came once and was very thin, thinner than we are now. She cried a lot and said she was going to a place where she could rest, but that before that, she would leave clues for us to find our father. Amelia pointed to her younger siblings. David still remembers her singing. He likes music just like she did. Arthur looked at the 3-year-old boy holding the baby. Even from a distance, he could see the child had features that seemed vaguely familiar, the shape of his eyes, the color of his hair. But it was the 2-year-old girl who disturbed him the most. She had Claire's nose, the same delicate shape of her lips. "And how did you get here, to this specific cemetery?" "Our mother taught us the way. She said if we were ever left alone, we should come here and look for a man who came every day to talk to someone he loved very much, that he would be our father and would take care of us." Amelia hesitated. "But we were scared to talk to you. You always looked so sad." Arthur felt his legs fail, and he sat down heavily on the ground next to Peter's headstone. It all felt like a twisted dream, a cruel mix of hope and terror. If these children were really Claire's, it meant he wasn't completely alone in the world, but it also meant his wife had kept monumental secrets throughout their entire marriage. "Are you sure it was Claire Morgan? The Claire who married me?" Claire Stevens was her name when she had us, but she showed us a picture once of the two of you together. She said that was our father, that his name was Arthur and he had a tractor company. Amelia searched in the pocket of her oversized t-shirt and pulled out a crumpled, dirty piece of paper. "She gave me this and told me to always keep it." Arthur held out a trembling hand and took the paper. It was a wallet-sized photo, clearly cut from a larger image, showing him and Claire on their wedding day. She was radiant, in the simple white dress she had chosen, and he was smiling in a way he could no longer remember how to smile. On the back, in delicate handwriting he recognized immediately, was written, "Arthur Morgan, Daddy of my stars." "Daddy of my stars," he repeated, his voice choked. That's what Claire used to call the children when they played in the yard on clear sky nights. Her stars. He had thought it was just an affectionate way to refer to the children they planned to have together, children who never came because Claire always postponed the subject, saying it wasn't the right time. "Sir?" Amelia gently touched his shoulder. "Are you going to take care of us?" The question echoed in the morning air, like an echo of Arthur's own fears. These 4 children, thin and clearly abandoned, looking at him as if he were their last hope. If they were really Claire's children, they were also, in a way, his stepchildren. But the practical reality of the situation was overwhelming. I don't know anything about taking care of small children," he admitted. "When Peter was a baby, it was Claire who did almost everything. I only helped on weekends." "We were not much trouble," Amelia said quickly, as if afraid he would change his mind. "David knows how to change Jude's diaper, and Laura hardly ever cries. We just need a place to sleep and a little bit of food." Arthur looked at the group of children again. The baby had started to cry weakly, a cry of hunger that made his heart ache. David was trying to console him, humming softly a tune Arthur recognized. It was a song Claire always sang when she was sad, a lullaby she said she had learned from her mother. "Are you hungry?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. "Always," Amelia answered honestly. "But we're used to it. Sometimes the people who come here give us something, but not always." Arthur stood up slowly, his body feeling too heavy for his legs. He looked one last time at Peter's headstone, as if asking for guidance from the son who could no longer advise him, and made a decision he knew would change his life forever. "Come with me," he said, his voice firmer than he felt. "Let's get out of here." "Where to?" Amelia asked, but she was already running towards her siblings. "Home, to my home." Arthur waited while she gathered the few things they had. Some old clothes in a torn plastic bag, and a bald doll that Laura clutched to her chest. "You're going to take a bath, eat properly, and then we'll talk more about all of this." As he walked towards the cemetery gate, followed by this strange procession, Arthur tried to imagine how he would explain this situation to Beatrice, his sister-in-law and business partner. How would he explain it to the employees, to the neighbors, to the entire society of Cedar Creek who knew his story as a lonely widower? But when he looked back and saw Amelia helping David carry baby Jude, when he saw little Laura stumbling in her oversized clothes while trying to keep up with the group, he knew there was no other choice. If these children were really Claire's, they were the only connection he had left to the woman he had loved. And if they weren't, he still couldn't let them starve on the streets. What he couldn't imagine was that, at that very moment, on the other side of town, Beatrice Morgan was receiving a phone call that would completely change her perception of her brother-in-law and of secrets she thought she had buried forever, along with Claire. The Morgan mansion stood imposingly on Grand Oak Avenue, one of the most exclusive areas in Cedar Creek, with its 3 stories, well-tended gardens and wrought-iron gates. The house had always been a source of pride for Arthur. Now, standing at the entrance, with 4 dirty, ragged children by his side, he questioned if he had made the most foolish decision of his life. "Wow, what a big house," Amelia whispered, her eyes wide as she observed the colonial facade. "Our mother said you lived in a beautiful place, but I didn't imagine it was like this." David, still carrying baby Jude, looked around with a mixture of fascination and fear. Little Laura hid behind her older sister, clearly intimidated by the size of the place. For children used to sleeping outdoors, that house must have seemed like an impossible palace. "It's just a house," Arthur said, trying to sound natural as he opened the gate. "You'll get used to it." Laidu. But as he walked up the entrance steps, he himself felt like a stranger. The house had remained virtually untouched since Claire and Peter's passing. The maids came twice a week to clean, but the rooms remained with the same decor, the same furniture, the same photographs that now took on a completely different meaning. "Mrs. Evans!" he called, addressing the housekeeper who managed the house. "I need you here, please." Mrs. Carmen Evans, a woman in her 60s who had worked for the family for nearly 2 decades, appeared in the living room from the kitchen. When she saw the children, her eyes widened and she almost dropped the coffee tray she was carrying. "My goodness, Mr. Morgan, what is this situation?" She looked from the children to him, trying to understand what was happening. "Carmen, these children will be staying here for a while. I need you to prepare baths for them and see if we have any clothes that fit. They'll also need food, especially the baby." "But sir, who are these children? Where did they come from?" Carmen approached cautiously, her maternal instinct overcoming her initial shock. "It's a long story I'm still trying to understand," Arthur replied, avoiding details. "For now, I just need you to help take care of them." Carmen nodded, though her eyebrows remained furrowed with concern. "I'll prepare everything. The older children can use the bathrooms on the 2nd floor, and for the baby, I'll set up a small tub in the kitchen." While Carmen organized the baths, Arthur found himself alone in the living room with the 4 children. They stayed clustered near the entrance as if ready to flee at any moment. The contrast between the elegance of the room, with its rosewood furniture, Persian rugs and crystal, and the children's condition, was shocking. "You can sit down," he said, pointing to the sofa. "Make yourselves comfortable." "We don't want to get it dirty," Amelia murmured, looking at her own grimy clothes. "Don't worry about that. Carmen will take care of the cleaning later." It was then that David put baby Jude down on the floor and walked towards the grand piano in the corner of the room. The instrument, a Steinway that Claire had insisted on buying but rarely played, was covered in a thin film of dust. "May I?" the boy asked, pointing to the piano. Arthur nodded, curious to see what would happen. David climbed onto the bench with difficulty, his thin legs barely reaching the pedals, and began to play. What came out were not the out-of-tune sounds one would expect from a 3-year-old, but a soft, melancholic melody that Arthur recognized immediately. It was Wayfaring Stranger, but played in a unique way, with variations Claire used to make when she felt nostalgic. The music echoed through the room, filled with emotion and technique that seemed impossible for someone so young. "How did he learn that?" Arthur asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Our mother taught him," Amelia replied. "She said music was important, that through it we could talk to those who were no longer here. David was always the best." Arthur approached the piano, watching the boy's small hands dance over the keys with a disturbing familiarity. It was as if Claire were there, playing through the child's hands. The same interpretation, the same flourishes, even the same way of slightly tilting his head during the more complex passages. "Claire taught me this same version," he said, more to himself than to the children. Just then, the phone rang. Arthur hesitated, not wanting to interrupt the almost magical moment, but the insistent ringing forced him to answer. "Arthur?" It was Beatrice's voice, filled with a tension he couldn't immediately identify. "I need to talk to you, urgently." "Beatrice, it's not a good time. I'm a bit busy." "It's about Claire." She interrupted, making Arthur's blood run cold. "I just received a very strange call from someone in Chicago. Someone who said they knew about some children she had before you got married." The silence that followed seemed eternal. Arthur looked at the children in his living room, David still playing the piano, Amelia taking care of the baby, Laura sleeping on the sofa, and felt as if two impossible worlds were colliding. "Who called?" he finally asked. "A woman who identified herself as a social worker. She said she was looking for some children who had run away from an institution a few weeks ago. When I told her Claire had died 3 years ago, she got very upset and started asking questions about you." "What kind of questions?" "And if you knew about her children, if you had had contact with them, if they might have tried to find you." Beatrice paused. "Arthur, do you know anything about this?" Before he could answer, Carmen appeared in the living room. "Mr. Morgan, the baths are ready. And, well, I found some of Peter's clothes in the closet. They're big, but they'll do for now." Beatrice must have heard the mention of clothes, because her voice immediately became alarmed. "Arthur, who are you talking to? Why are they talking about children's clothes?" "Beatrice, I'm going to have to call you back," he said quickly. "No, don't hang up. Tell me now, are those children with you?" Arthur looked again at Amelia, who had stopped tending to the baby and was now watching him with a worried expression. The girl clearly understood that trouble was approaching. "They're here," he finally admitted. "My God, Arthur, do you have any idea what you've done? These children could be—" Beatrice paused, as if choosing her words carefully. "It could be a setup, a scam, opportunistic people who know about your situation." "They're Claire's children," Arthur said, his voice firmer than he felt. "How can you be so sure? Because a 4-year-old girl said so? Because they showed you an old photo?" Beatrice's voice was getting higher and higher. "Arthur, you need to call the authorities right now." "I'm not doing that." "Then I will." The line went dead. Arthur hung up the phone with trembling hands. He looked at the children, who were now watching him in silence. Even David had stopped playing and turned on the bench to face him. They clearly understood that their presence there was being threatened. "Are we going to have to leave?" Amelia asked, her small voice breaking Arthur's heart. "No," he said, surprising himself with the determination in his own voice. "You're not. This is your home now, and no one is going to take you from here." But as he spoke those words, Arthur knew he had declared war against forces he didn't yet fully understand. And deep in his chest, a terrible doubt began to grow. What if Beatrice was right? What if this was all an elaborate act? The answer would come sooner than he imagined, because Beatrice was already on her way to the house, and she was bringing information that would turn this day of discoveries into a true nightmare. Beatrice Morgan arrived at the Grand Oak Avenue mansion less than an hour after the call, driving her silver BMW at a speed that bordered on reckless. At 45, she maintained the austere demeanor she had acquired during 20 years of managing the financial side of Morgan Agricultural Equipment. Her relationship with Arthur had always been professional and distant. She respected her brother-in-law as a businessman, but had never fully approved of his marriage to her younger sister, Claire. When she entered the house without knocking, she found a scene that made her stop at the living room door. The 4 children were sitting around the dining table, clean and wearing clothes that had clearly belonged to Peter. Mrs. Evans had managed to adjust the larger pieces, but the children still looked like they were wearing adult costumes. Arthur was serving sandwiches with a gentleness Beatrice had never seen in him. "My God," she muttered, observing the domestic scene. "You really brought them home." The children stopped eating immediately, sensing the tension in the elegant woman's voice. Amelia protectively positioned herself in front of her younger siblings, a gesture that did not go unnoticed by Beatrice. "Beatrice, these are Amelia, David, Laura, and baby Jude," Arthur said, trying to keep a casual tone. "Children, this is Beatrice, my sister-in-law." "Your mother's sister-in-law, actually," Beatrice corrected, her eyes scanning each of the children with the same attention she gave to the company's financial statements. "If Claire really was your mother." "She was," Amelia said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "She talked about our father's family. Said he had a sister-in-law who took care of the company's numbers." Beatrice felt a chill. The description was too specific to be invented by a 4-year-old. But her professional skepticism didn't allow her to let her guard down easily. "Arthur, I need to talk to you. Alone," she said, casting a significant glance towards the children. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of them." "Absolutely not." Beatrice turned to Carmen. "Could you take the children to the backyard for a few minutes?" Carmen, clearly uncomfortable with the tension in the air, gathered the children and took them to the back garden. Jude had started crying again, and David automatically picked up his brother, humming softly the same tune he had played on the piano. Once they were alone, Beatrice turned to Arthur with an expression he knew well. It was the same look she used when she discovered irregularities in the company's books. "Have you completely lost your mind?" she began without preamble. "You brought 4 unknown children into your house based on what? The word of a 4-year-old? They have a photo from our wedding, Beatrice. They know things about Claire that only someone very close would know. Anyone can have a photo, Arthur, and information about Claire." Well, she wasn't exactly discreet about her personal life. There was something in Beatrice's tone that made Arthur pause. "What do you mean by that?" Beatrice hesitated, as if debating internally how much she should reveal. "Claire had secrets, Arthur, things she never told you." "What kind of things?" "Before she married you, she was involved in some complicated situations, financial problems, questionable relationships." Beatrice walked to the window, watching the children in the garden. "She asked me for money several times in the first few months after your wedding, always with vague excuses, always with promises to explain later." Arthur felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "And you never told me?" "She begged me not to, said she was trying to sort out some things from her past, that everything would be settled soon." Beatrice turned to face him. "But it never was it? She remained strange, mysterious until the end. That doesn't mean these children are imposters. No, but it means you need to be more careful. The call I received today confirmed some of my suspicions. Beatrice took a piece of paper from her pocket. I wrote down the number of the woman who called. She said she worked at an institution in Chicago that cared for abandoned children. When I mentioned Claire had died, she got very agitated. Agitated how? As if she knew something she wasn't telling me. She asked a lot of questions about you, about where you lived, about whether you could take care of children. Beatrice paused. Arthur, it seemed to me that she already knew these children were here. The revelation hit Arthur like a punch. If the social worker already knew the children's location, did that mean the whole situation had been orchestrated? That Amelia and her siblings were really lying? At that moment, the sound of the piano echoed through the house again. David had returned from the garden and was playing again, this time a different song, a slow, melancholic waltz that Claire used to play on sleepless nights. How does he know that song? Beatrice muttered, clearly disturbed. Amelia said Claire taught him. Arthur, that waltz! Claire composed that song. She never showed it to anyone but me and you. She never even recorded it or wrote it on sheet music. Beatrice approached the living room door, watching the boy play. How could a 3-year-old know a composition that never left this house? The silence that followed was heavy with implications. If David really knew Claire's secret song, it proved he had had close contact with her. But it also raised disturbing questions about what else Claire had hidden from Arthur. There's one more thing, Beatrice said, her voice lower. When you called Carmen this morning asking her to prepare the house for the children, I got curious and went to check some of Claire's old documents. I found something you should see. She took a folder from her pocket and handed it to Arthur. Inside was a birth certificate in the name of Amelia Stevens, with a date of birth that matched the girl's apparent age. The mother's name was clearly listed as Claire Stevens, but the father's field was blank. Where did you find this? Arthur asked, his voice almost inaudible. In Claire's safe, the one she said only held some old family jewelry. Beatrice watched her brother-in-law's shocked expression. There are 3 more certificates in there, Arthur, one for each child. Arthur held the documents with trembling hands. The certificates seemed legitimate, with all the official stamps and signatures. If they were real, it meant that Claire had not only hidden the existence of 4 children during their entire marriage, but had also kept secret documents about them. Why would she do this? He murmured. Why hide children from me? Maybe because they weren't yours, Beatrice said softly. Maybe because she was protecting you from a truth she knew would hurt you. At that moment, Amelia appeared at the living room door. Her clothes were a bit dirty from the garden, but she looked healthier and more alert than in the morning. Mr. Morgan, can I talk to you? Of course, little one. Ma'am, Amelia looked at Beatrice. You're just like our mother said you'd be, serious and a little angry, but good on the inside. Beatrice was visibly shaken by the observation. Claire talked about me. She did. She said you took care of your brother as if he were your own son, that you were very brave and smart. Amelia approached cautiously. She said that if we ever needed help badly, we should trust you too. The girl's words seemed to completely disarm Beatrice. She knelt down to Amelia's level, examining the small face with a new intensity. Did Claire really say that? She did. And one more thing. Amelia hesitated, as if deciding whether to continue. She said you were afraid to love us because you had already lost so many people you loved, but that deep in your heart, you wanted a big family. Beatrice turned pale. It was true. She had lost her parents young, had never married for fear of getting hurt, and had dedicated her entire life to a career and, in a way, to Arthur. But this was information that only someone very close to her could know. "How did Claire know that?" she whispered. "Because you were friends before she became your sister-in-law," Amelia replied simply. "She showed us pictures of when you were young together." The revelation left Arthur and Beatrice staring at each other with the same shocked expression. If Amelia was right, it meant there were entire layers of Claire's life that they both knew nothing about. Night fell over Cedar Creek with a tense quietness that seemed to reflect the emotional state of the Morgan house. The children had been put to bed in the second-floor rooms, Amelia and Laura sharing the old guest room, David in a small office that Carmen had makeshiftly turned into a bedroom, and baby Jude in a borrowed crib set up in the master bedroom next to Arthur. Beatrice had decided to spend the night, claiming she needed to observe the children better to form a more informed opinion. In truth, the day's revelations had shaken her deeply, awakening memories she had forced to the back of her mind years ago. Now, sitting in the library with Arthur, she held a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, watching her brother-in-law nervously shuffle through some documents scattered on the mahogany table. "I need to tell you something," she said finally, breaking a silence that had lasted almost an hour. "About how Claire and I met." Arthur looked up from the papers. "You met when she started working as a secretary at the company, right?" "No," Beatrice sighed deeply. "We met long before that, when I was 22 and she was 18. I was doing volunteer work at an institution in Chicago that cared for single mothers and abandoned children." The revelation made Arthur sit up straight in his armchair. Claire was in this institution. She was. She had just arrived from a small town, pregnant and with nowhere to stay. Beatrice paused, fighting back emotions. She was so young, so scared, but also determined to give a better life to the child she was expecting. Child! Arthur's heart sped up. "She was pregnant when you met." "With Amelia. The pregnancy was near its end, and Claire had absolutely nothing. No proper clothes, no organized documents, no family to support her." Beatrice got up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark garden. "I offered to help her. I paid for the medical costs of the birth, got her a place to live after Amelia was born. I even arranged a job for her at a company I knew. At Morgan Equipment," Arthur understood. "Exactly. I thought it would be a simple, temporary favor. Claire would work for a few years, save some money, and move on with her life." Beatrice laughed bitterly. "But things got complicated when you fell in love with her." Arthur remembered that time. Claire had arrived at the company as a temporary secretary, but her intelligence and dedication quickly caught his attention. She was mysterious, reserved about her past, but there was a sadness in her eyes that awakened in him an urgent need to protect her. "Where was Amelia during those years?" he asked. "With a temporary foster family that Claire had found through the institution. She visited her daughter regularly, but she couldn't take the child in because she didn't have the financial means." Beatrice turned to face him. "When you started dating seriously, she confessed to me that she was terrified. She didn't know how to tell you about Amelia." "Why didn't she tell me?" "Because you were a successful, respected man with an organized life, and she was a woman with a complicated past and a daughter to raise. She was afraid you would reject her." Arthur slowly absorbed this information. He remembered how Claire always avoided talking about the time before they met, how she would change the subject when he asked about family or her plans to have children. And the others, David, Laura, Jude. "That I don't know. After you got married, Claire drifted away from me a bit. She said she wanted to start a new life without shadows from the past." Beatrice sat back down. "But a few months before she died, she came to me desperate. She said she had made terrible mistakes, that she had children scattered around who needed her, but she was too sick to care for them. And you told me nothing. She made me promise not to say anything until she found the courage to talk to you herself. But then Peter's accident happened, and she was so devastated that she never brought it up again. At that moment, The sound of small footsteps echoed down the hall. Amelia appeared at the library door, wearing a pair of Peter's borrowed pajamas that were far too big for her. "Excuse me," she said shyly. "Jude is crying a lot, and I don't know what to do." Arthur got up immediately. "I'll go see what's happening." "Can I come too?" Beatrice asked, surprising herself. "Maybe I can help." When they reached the master bedroom, they found a scene that deeply touched both adults. David was sitting on the edge of the crib, humming softly to his baby brother, while Laura slept curled in a blanket on the floor next to Arthur's bed. It was as if the children had instinctively regrouped to protect each other. "He's hungry," David explained, with the seriousness of someone much older. "He always gets like this when he's hungry." Beatrice approached the crib and picked Jude up. The baby calmed down immediately, as if recognizing someone trustworthy in her. "I'll go make a bottle," she said, again surprising herself with the naturalness of the gesture. While she went down to the kitchen with the baby, Arthur was left alone in the room with Amelia and David. Laura continued to sleep soundly, apparently exhausted from the first day of safety she had experienced in a long time. "Have you always taken care of each other like this?" Arthur asked, helping David settle into an armchair near the crib. "Always," Amelia replied. "When our mother couldn't be with us, I was the one who took care of everyone. David helped me with Laura and Jude." "Did your mother stay away often?" "Sometimes she would disappear for days. She always came back very sad and very thin, as if she were sick." Amelia sat on the edge of the bed. She said she was trying to find a big house for all of us to live in together, but that it was very difficult. David, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. "Our mother cried a lot when she thought we weren't looking. She would talk to herself, apologizing to someone." "Apologizing for what?" Arthur asked. "For abandoning her children, for not being a better mother." David looked directly at Arthur, but she always said it wasn't her fault, that bad people had made her choose between staying with us or protecting us. The children's statement sent a shiver down Arthur's spine. What kind of situation would force a mother to abandon her own children? What bad people had Claire faced? Beatrice returned with the bottle, and the four of them watched in silence as Jude fed. It was a strangely familiar scene, as if it were a routine that had always existed in that house. "Beatrice," Arthur said when the baby finished eating, "are you sure you don't know anything about the other 3 children? I'm sure Claire never gave me details, but..." She hesitated. "There were some strange things in the last months before she died. Phone calls she would take in another room, quick trips to Chicago she never really explained." "And you never suspected?" "I did. But Claire was so fragile after Peter's death that I thought it was just depression." Beatrice placed Jude back in the crib. "Now I realize she might have been trying to gather her children, preparing a plan to bring them close to you. But why didn't she tell me anything?" "Maybe because she knew she was dying," Amelia said with surprising directness for a 4-year-old. "She always said she was very tired, that she wanted to rest, but before that, she needed to be sure we would be safe." The girl's words echoed through the room like a revelation. If Claire really knew she was sick, if she had spent the last months of her life trying to secure the future of the children she had been forced to abandon, it would explain her strange behavior and mysterious trips. But it also raised a terrifying question. If Claire had died before managing to reunite all the children, how had they managed to find Arthur? And who else knew of their existence? The answer would come sooner than any of them imagined, because at that very moment, a dark car was parking discreetly across the street, and 2 men were watching the Morgan house through binoculars, waiting for the right moment to make their approach. The next morning brought a different atmosphere to the Morgan house. Arthur woke up to the sound of laughter coming from downstairs, something he hadn't heard in 3 years. When he went down for breakfast, he found a scene that made him stop at the kitchen door. Carmen was teaching Amelia how to make sugar cookies, while David entertained Laura with nursery rhymes. Jude was sleeping peacefully in a makeshift carriage made from a laundry basket. "Good morning, Daddy Arthur," Amelia said naturally, and the words hit his heart with unexpected force. "Good morning, little one," he replied, trying to hide his emotion. Beatrice was already at the table, drinking coffee and watching the children with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. There was softness there, but also constant vigilance, as if she were looking for something specific. "Slept well?" she asked when Arthur sat down. "Better than I expected." It was true. For the first time in years, he had slept soundly, without the recurring nightmares about Peter and Claire's deaths. "They did too," Beatrice observed, nodding towards the children. "Carmen told me none of them woke up during the night. Apparently it's the first time in a long time they've felt truly safe." Just then, the doorbell rang. Carmen went to answer, and they heard voices at the entrance, a low but tense conversation that made Beatrice and Arthur exchange worried glances. "Mr. Morgan," Carmen appeared at the kitchen door with a nervous expression. "There are two men here who want to talk to you. They say they're from social services." The mood in the kitchen changed instantly. The children stopped what they were doing and instinctively gathered around Arthur, even Laura, who barely understood what was happening, seeming to sense the danger in the air. "I'll get it," Beatrice said, standing up. "No, I'll go," Arthur insisted. "Stay here with the children." In the living room, two men in dark suits were waiting. The older one, about 50, introduced himself as Dr. Henry Morris, Regional Coordinator for Child Protective Services. The younger one, who couldn't have been more than 30, was introduced only as Assistant Smith. "Mr. Morgan, we received an anonymous tip that there are unaccompanied children at this residence," said Dr. Morris, his tone formal but not hostile. "We need to verify the situation." "What kind of tip?" Arthur asked, trying to stay calm. "That 4 minors are living here without proper documentation, possibly in an irregular situation." Assistant Smith consulted a clipboard. "We also received information that these children may have run away from a protective institution in Chicago." Arthur's blood ran cold. The tip was too specific to be a coincidence. Someone knew exactly where the children were and had deliberately contacted the authorities. "The children didn't run away from anywhere," he said. They are part of my family." "Mr. Morgan, with all due respect, our records indicate that you lost your only son 3 years ago and have been living alone since then." Dr. Morris shuffled through some papers. "There is no documentation of adoption or legal guardianship of other children. The situation is complicated. I just found out that the children claim to be the daughters of your late wife," Assistant Smith completed. "Yes, we were informed of that version of events." The phrase made Arthur realize that whoever had made the tip knew intimate details of the situation. It wasn't a generic complaint from worried neighbors. It was someone who knew exactly what was happening. "We need to speak with the children," Dr. Morris said. "It's standard procedure." Beatrice appeared in the living room at that moment, holding Jude in her arms. The other 3 children were behind her, visibly scared but trying to stay brave. "Children, Doctor," Morris said with a smile that was meant to be reassuring, "you don't need to be afraid. We just want to ask a few questions." "We don't want to leave," Amelia said immediately, positioning herself in front of her siblings. "This is our home now." "No one said anything about leaving," the doctor replied, "but we need to understand how you got here." Assistant Smith knelt down to Amelia's level. "Can you tell us where you were living before?" Amelia hesitated, looking at Arthur as if for guidance. We were looking for our father." "And how did you know this gentleman was your father?" Our mother taught us. She told us where to find him when we needed to. Dr. Morris made careful notes. And what was your mother's name? Claire Stevens. Claire Stevens, who later became Claire Morgan, Beatrice added, my sister-in-law. Assistant Smith exchanged a significant look with Dr. Morris. Can you prove that, ma'am? Beatrice handed him the birth certificate she had found in Claire's safe. The two men examined the documents for several minutes, checking stamps and signatures. These documents appear to be authentic, Dr. Morris admitted, but that doesn't clarify why the children were living on the streets if they had a family. Because our mother was sick and couldn't take care of us, David said, surprising everyone by speaking up. She said bad people wouldn't let her stay with us. What bad people? Assistant Smith asked, clearly interested. I don't know. She just said there were people who didn't want us to be together. Dr. Morris made more notes. Have you ever been in a protective institution? The children looked at each other nervously. Finally, Amelia nodded. For a while, but we didn't like it there. Why not? Because it wasn't a good place, she said simply. But there was something in her voice that suggested traumatic experiences. At that moment, Dr. Morris's phone rang. He stepped away to answer, speaking quietly, but everyone could hear snippets of the conversation. Yes, they're here. No, they seem to be well cared for. I see. Are you sure? When he hung up, his expression had completely changed. There was now a worrying seriousness in his eyes. Mr. Morgan, I need you to come with us to clarify some points at the station. Why? Arthur asked, alarmed. We've just received information that there may be irregularities related to these children's documentation. Nothing that compromises you directly, but we need to investigate. He's not going anywhere without a lawyer, Beatrice said firmly. That's his right. But as for the children, Dr. Morris paused. As a precaution, we will need to temporarily transfer them to a shelter until the situation is clarified. No! Amelia screamed, running to hug Arthur's legs. We're not leaving here! It's just temporary, Assistant Smith said, but his voice didn't sound convincing. Beatrice held Jude tighter. How long is temporary? A few days, maybe a week. A week can be an eternity for children who have been abandoned so many times, Beatrice said, her voice filled with emotion. Dr. Morris seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the situation. Ma'am, I understand your concern, but we follow protocols. If the children really belong to this family, everything will be cleared up quickly. Well, and if we don't clear it up? Arthur asked. The silence that followed answered his question better than any words. It was at that moment that David broke away from the group and ran to the piano. He began to play Claire's secret waltz, the one only Beatrice and Arthur knew. But this time, he added something new, an additional melody that transformed the music into something even more beautiful and complex. How does he know that variation? Dr. Morris murmured, clearly impressed by the child's musical ability. Because Claire taught him, Beatrice said, and this specific variation. She only played it when she was very emotional. Assistant Smith watched the scene with an expression that didn't match his previous official demeanor. There was recognition in his eyes, as if that music meant something to him too. Dr. Morris, he said quietly, perhaps we should reconsider the protocol in this specific case. Why? Because I think these children really belong here. And separating families without absolute necessity goes against our own principles. But before Dr. Morris could respond, a new presence appeared at the living room door, an elegant, middle-aged woman whom none of them had seen arrive. I apologize for the intrusion, she said with a firm voice, but I believe I can clarify some issues regarding these children. The woman who had appeared at the door was tall and elegant, wearing a well-cut grey suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Her greying hair was tied in an impeccable bun, and there was a natural authority in her posture that made everyone in the room straighten up instinctively. "My name is Dr. Lucy Vance," she said, entering the room without waiting for an invitation. "I am a lawyer specializing in family law, and I represent the interests of these children." Dr. Morris frowned. "Ma'am, we were not informed that there was legal representation in this case, because it was only just now activated." Dr. Vance opened her briefcase and took out some documents. "I received an urgent call from someone who was following this situation and decided it was time to intervene." "Who called you?" Beatrice asked suspiciously. "Someone who knew Claire Stevens very well and who had been trying to protect these children for years." The lawyer looked directly at Amelia. "Your mother left very specific instructions about what should happen if anything happened to her." Arthur's heart sped up. "What kind of instructions?" "Instructions on where the children should be placed, who should take care of them, and most importantly, who should be contacted if anyone tried to separate them." Dr. Vance handed a document to Dr. Morris. "This is a legally valid will, signed by Claire Morgan 2 months before her death, establishing Arthur Morgan as the legal guardian of her 4 children." The silence in the room was absolute. Dr. Morris examined the document carefully, his expression gradually changing from skepticism to surprise. "This document seems authentic," he said finally, "but why was it never presented before?" Because it was in the possession of a third party, awaiting the appropriate moment," the lawyer explained. "Claire knew her health was deteriorating and wanted to ensure that when the children finally found Arthur, there would be legal backing to keep them with him." "What third party?" Beatrice insisted. Dr. Vance hesitated for a moment. "Someone who worked at the institution where Claire temporarily left the children. Someone who realized it wasn't a safe place and helped the children escape when the time came." Assistant Smith, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. "Are you referring to the St. Vincent's Institution in Chicago?" The question made Dr. Vance look at him with renewed attention. "Mr. Smith, isn't it? Interesting that you know that specific location. It's my job to know the institutions in the region," he replied, but there was something evasive in his voice. "Certainly it is." The lawyer opened her briefcase again. "Especially considering that St. Vincent's Institution was shut down 6 months ago for serious irregularities, including child abuse and illegal adoptions." The revelation fell like a bomb in the room. The children visibly stirred, and Amelia squeezed Arthur's leg even tighter. "The children were in that institution?" Dr. Morris asked, his voice filled with concern. "For a very traumatic period of their lives," Dr. Vance confirmed. "And it was thanks to the courage of some conscientious employees that they managed to escape before the situation became even worse." Arthur knelt down to Amelia's level. "Is that why you didn't want to talk about where you were before?" Amelia nodded, tears beginning to stream down her face. "It was a very ugly place. The people were mean to us." "You don't have to worry about that anymore," Beatrice said, her voice choked with emotion. "You will never go back to a place like that." Assistant Smith was visibly uncomfortable, nervously fiddling with his clipboard. Dr. Morris noticed his subordinate's agitation. "Smith, are you all right?" "Doctor, perhaps we should conclude the visit for today," he said quickly. "There is clearly adequate legal documentation, and the children seem to be well cared for. But we received specific instructions to—" "The instructions we received," Smith interrupted, "were based on information that has now proven to be incomplete." Dr. Vance watched the exchange between the 2 men with growing interest. "Mr. Smith, may I ask who exactly gave these instructions to check this house?" The young assistant turned pale. It was an anonymous tip, as we already explained." An anonymous tip that knew very specific details about the situation. The lawyer approached him. Details that only someone very close to the recent events could know? I don't know what you're insinuating. I'm insinuating that someone who didn't want these children to find a loving family made sure to try and separate them again. Dr. Vance handed another document to Dr. Morris. This is a report on the investigations at St. Vincent's Institution. You will find the list of people identified as accomplices in the illegal scheme that operated there very interesting. Dr. Morris quickly read the document, and his expression grew increasingly grave. Smith, he said slowly, I need to talk to you. Now. Doctor, I can explain. Outside? Now. The two men left the room, leaving a tense atmosphere behind. Through the ajar door, everyone could hear a heated argument, with Dr. Morris clearly confronting his assistant about something he had discovered in the report. What's going on? Arthur asked the lawyer. What's happening is that some of the people involved in the St. Vincent's Institution scheme were not all identified and punished, Dr. Vance explained. And some of those people have an interest in keeping the children away from any environment where they might feel safe enough to talk about what they saw and suffered. Beatrice understood immediately. Assistant Smith was trying to take the children back into the system, not necessarily back to the same institution, but to an environment where they could be controlled and silenced. At that moment, Dr. Morris returned to the room alone, his expression somber. I offer my deepest apologies for this situation. My assistant, well, it seems he wasn't just acting as a public servant. Where is he? Dr. Vance asked. He fled. As soon as he realized I had discovered his connection to St. Vincent's Institution, he ran off. Dr. Morris turned to Arthur. Mr. Morgan, from what I can see here, you have all legal rights over these children. There is no reason to remove them from this house. And the investigation? It will be about the people who tried to use our agency to separate a legally constituted family. Dr. Morris knelt to speak with the children. You are safe here. No one is going to take you from this house. Amelia ran to hug David and Laura, and they all started to cry. Not from sadness, but from relief. It was as if they could finally believe they had found a real home. Dr. Vance, Beatrice said, who exactly contacted you? Who was protecting these children all this time? The lawyer smiled for the first time. Someone who worked at St. Vincent's Institution and who risked a great deal to ensure that when the children were ready, they could find their true family. A female employee, a male employee, a young psychologist who realized what was happening and decided to act. Dr. Vance looked out the window. In fact, he's outside right now, waiting to know if it's safe to introduce himself. Arthur followed her gaze and saw a young man, perhaps 25, standing near the gate. There was something familiar in his posture, in the way he watched the house. He can come in, Arthur said. I want to meet someone who risked so much to protect these children. When the young man entered the room, Amelia ran to him immediately. Dr. Raphael, she shouted, hugging him. You did it! You brought us home! Hi, little warrior, he said, hugging her back. You finally got where you were supposed to be. Dr. Raphael Scott looked at Arthur with an intense expression. Mr. Morgan, there are things about Claire and what she went through that you need to know. Things that will explain not only why these children suffered so much, but also why your wife could never tell the truth about her past. What things? Arthur asked, though part of him feared the answer. Things that involve powerful people in the region, people Claire discovered were using abandoned children for very dark purposes, said Dr. Raphael, and people who are still free, doing everything to keep their secrets buried. Dr. Raphael Scott sat in the armchair that Dr. Morris had vacated, his hands trembling slightly as he gathered his thoughts. He was a young man, but his eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen things he shouldn't have. The children gathered around him, clearly feeling safe in his presence. "First of all," he said, looking directly at Arthur, "I need you to know that Claire loved you deeply. Everything she did, all the lies she told, were to protect not only the children, but you as well." "Protect me from what?" Arthur asked, though a part of him already feared the answer. "From people who wouldn't hesitate to destroy your life, your company, your family, if they knew you were too close to the truth." Dr. Raphael paused, looking at Beatrice. "You were also being protected, ma'am, though you didn't know it." "What truth?" Beatrice insisted. "The truth about what was really happening at St. Vincent's Institution and other similar institutions in the region. The truth about who was behind these schemes." Dr. Raphael leaned forward. "Claire accidentally discovered that the children weren't just being neglected in these institutions, they were being used." "Used for what?" Arthur's voice came out as a whisper. "Child labor disguised as educational activities. Children being loaned out to wealthy families as unpaid servants, and worse." Dr. Raphael looked at the children, carefully choosing his words. "Fraudulent adoption schemes, where families paid large sums to adopt children who were later returned when they no longer served the buyer's purposes." The silence in the room was heavy. Beatrice covered her mouth with her hands, horrified. Arthur felt nauseous, imagining what these small, helpless children had suffered. "How did Claire find this out?" Beatrice asked. "When she had to leave Amelia at the first institution, she insisted on frequent visits. During these visits, she started noticing strange things. Children who disappeared without explanation, staff who lied about the whereabouts of certain children, suspicious conversations she overheard by chance." Dr. Raphael stroked Amelia's hair. "Claire was smart and observant. She started asking discreet questions. And that put her in danger," Arthur understood. "Grave danger. When the right people realized she was investigating, they started pressuring her, first with veiled threats, then with emotional blackmail. They said if she kept asking questions, she would never see her children again." Amelia moved closer to Dr. Raphael. "Is that why our mother cried so much? Because she was afraid?" "Your mother cried because she felt powerless," he explained gently. "She wanted to protect you, but the bad people were too powerful. So she did the only thing she could. She started planning a way to get you out of there without anyone noticing." "Why didn't she go to the police?" Beatrice asked. Dr. Raphael laughed bitterly. "Because some of the people involved were the very ones who were supposed to protect children. Public officials, people with political connections, even some local police officers, including Assistant Smith," said Dr. Vance, who had been listening intently. "Exactly. Smith wasn't just a corrupt employee. He was an active part of the scheme, responsible for identifying vulnerable families that could be manipulated or intimidated." Arthur stood up and began pacing the room, trying to process all this information. "So when Claire married me, now she thought she had finally found a way to protect her children, a respected, financially stable man with connections in the community." Dr. Raphael watched him. "But she also realized that involving you could put you in danger. That's why she never told me. That's why she spent years trying to find a way to bring the children close without exposing you. She knew if she just showed up with 4 children, people would ask questions, they would investigate, and eventually they would discover the connection to the institution." Beatrice understood, and that would lead to the people behind the scheme. "Who would do anything to keep their secrets?" Dr. Raphael confirmed, "including harming Arthur, the company, anyone who could threaten their operations." At that moment, David broke away from the group and went to the piano again. But this time, instead of playing, he just stood beside the instrument, looking at the keys with a distant expression. "David!" Amelia called. "Are you okay?" The boy turned to Dr. Raphael. "Can you tell them about the other boys?" The question visibly saddened the psychologist. "David, maybe now is not the time." "No," the boy said, with an impressive determination for his age. "They need to know, so they can help." "What other boys?" Arthur asked, a terrible suspicion starting to form in his mind. Dr. Raphael sighed deeply. "There were other children in the institution when you were there. Children who weren't as lucky to escape." "Are they still there?" Beatrice asked, alarmed. "Not at St. Vincent's, which was closed, but they were transferred to other institutions in the same network." Dr. Raphael looked at Arthur. "This is another reason why it was important for you to find a safe family, so that eventually you could testify about what you saw, help locate the other children." How many children?" Arthur's voice was hoarse with emotion. "We don't know for sure. Dozens, maybe hundreds over the years." The weight of this revelation fell on everyone like an avalanche. It wasn't just about 4 children who had found a home. It was about an entire system of abuse that continued to operate, with countless children still suffering. "What can we do?" Beatrice asked. "For now, nothing but keep these 4 children safe," Dr. Vance replied. "They are the only witnesses we've managed to get out of there. Eventually, when they are emotionally ready, their testimonies could help dismantle the entire scheme." "But that could take years," Arthur protested. "It could. And during that time, these children need stability, love, and above all, security." Dr. Raphael stood up. "That's why it was so important that they reached you." Amelia approached Arthur. "Daddy Arthur, can we really stay here forever, even knowing all these bad things?" Arthur knelt and hugged the girl. "Especially knowing these bad things, you are safe here, and we will do everything to keep you that way." "And the other boys?" David insisted. "We can't forget the other boys." "We won't forget," Beatrice promised. "When you're ready, we'll find a way to help them too." Dr. Raphael smiled for the first time since he had arrived. Claire would be proud. She always said that if she could get you to a real family, that family would also care about all the other children who still needed help. "She planned this too?" Arthur asked. Claire planned everything, even her own departure. Dr. Raphael hesitated. She knew she was getting sick. She knew she didn't have much time. So in her last months, she worked tirelessly to create a plan that would ensure you found a family, that those responsible would eventually be punished, and that other children would be saved. A plan that included her own death. Beatrice's voice was filled with horror. A plan that included her sacrificing herself to ensure the future of the children she loved more than her own life. At that moment, they all understood the magnitude of Claire's love. She hadn't just hidden secrets out of fear or shame. She had carefully orchestrated a rescue operation that would continue to function even after she was gone. But as they absorbed this revelation, none of them noticed that across the street, Smith was watching the house through binoculars, talking on the phone with someone who was clearly not pleased with his mission's failure. The war for the future of these children was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since Dr. Morris's visit and the revelations about Claire's past. Life in the Morgan house had found a surprisingly natural rhythm, as if the 4 children had always belonged there. Amelia had started attending a nearby private school where her intelligence and maturity impressed the teachers. David began taking private piano lessons with a teacher Beatrice had hired, who was amazed by the boy's musical talent. Laura had completely adapted to her new life, running through the garden with a joy she had never known before. And Jude, now almost 9 months old, had started taking his first steps. Arthur had transformed completely. The lonely, depressed man who visited the cemetery daily had given way to a dedicated father who came home from work early to have dinner with the children and help with homework. Beatrice, in turn, had discovered a maternal calling she didn't know she possessed, spending entire weekends organizing activities for the children. But on that Thursday morning, the tranquility was broken by a discovery that would change everything again. Carmen was organizing Claire's personal belongings, which had been stored in a box in the attic, when she found something that made her blood run cold. It was a journal, but not an ordinary one. It was a meticulous record of information about the network of corrupt institutions, with names, dates, locations, and methods used to exploit the children. "Mr. Morgan," she called, coming down the stairs quickly, "you need to see something important." Arthur was in the living room, helping Amelia with a math assignment when Carmen appeared with the journal in her hands. The housekeeper looked visibly shaken. "What happened, Carmen?" "I found this among Mrs. Claire's things. It's not a regular journal, sir. It has names of important people in the city, details about very ugly things." Arthur took the notebook carefully. On the very first pages, he recognized Claire's delicate handwriting, but the content was shocking. There were detailed records of public officials involved in the scheme, amounts paid in bribes, even photographs of official documents that proved the irregularities. "My God," he murmured, flipping through the pages. Claire documented everything. Beatrice arrived at that moment, coming home from work early to have lunch with the children, and immediately sensed the tension in the room. "What's going on?" Arthur showed her the journal. As Beatrice read, her expression grew increasingly grave. The names in it included people they knew personally, local businessmen, regional politicians, even some clients of Morgan Agricultural Equipment. This is a bombshell," Beatrice whispered. "If this information becomes public, several very powerful people will go to jail," Arthur completed. At that moment, Amelia appeared in the room. "Daddy Arthur, what's that book?" Arthur quickly closed the journal. "It's just an old notebook of Mommy Claire's little one." But Amelia came closer, observing the worried expressions of the adults. "It's about the bad people, isn't it?" "And Daddy," the girl's direct question caught everyone by surprise. How could a 4-year-old perceive the nature of the content just by watching their reactions? "Amelia, how do you know that?" Beatrice asked gently. "Because our mother always wrote in that notebook when she was very worried about the bad people. She said that one day, when we were big, we could use these notes to protect other boys and girls." Arthur knelt to the girl's level. "Did your mother show you this notebook before?" "She taught me where it was hidden. She said if anything happened to her, and if the bad people came after us, I should tell you to look for the Book of Truths in the place where she kept her most important secrets." "And where was that place?" Carmen asked. "In the attic, in a box inside another box under old photos," Amelia replied simply. Beatrice and Arthur looked at each other. Claire had not only documented the entire criminal network, but had also trained her 4-year-old daughter to ensure this information reached the right hands at the right time. "Is there anything else your mother taught you?" Arthur asked. Amelia hesitated, as if deciding whether to reveal an important secret. "She taught me a name. She said if we found you, and then people appeared wanting to take us away, I should say this name." "What name?" "Detective Frank Riley." Amelia spoke clearly, as if she had practiced many times. She said he was a good man who was trying to arrest the bad people, but that he needed proof. Carmen turned pale. "Mr. Morgan, I know that name. Detective Riley is from the FBI. He was in town a few months ago asking questions about charities." "Claire was working with the FBI?" Beatrice asked, incredulous. "It seems so," Arthur replied, flipping through the journal again. "And this notebook must be part of the evidence she was collecting for them." Just then, the phone rang. Carmen answered and became visibly nervous during the conversation. "Mr. Morgan," she said after hanging up, "it was a man asking about the children. He wanted to know if they were okay, if they had adapted. Very specific questions." "Who was it?" "He said he was a social worker, but when I asked for his full name, he hung up." The mysterious call put everyone on high alert. Arthur picked up the phone and called Dr. Raphael. "Raphael, it's Arthur Morgan. We just received a suspicious call here at the house." "Mr. Morgan, I'm glad you called. I was just trying to get in touch. I found out that Smith didn't act alone last week. He has superiors who are very interested in knowing where the children are." "What kind of superiors?" "The kind who have a lot to lose if certain information comes to light. The kind who wouldn't hesitate to try and recover the only witnesses who escaped their control." Arthur felt a chill down his spine. "Are the children in danger?" "Potentially, yes. That's why I'm calling. I think it's time to contact Detective Riley." "Coincidentally, we just discovered that Claire was working with him." "That's no coincidence, Mr. Morgan. It's part of her plan. Claire knew you would eventually need official protection, and Riley is the only officer in the region who can be completely trusted." After hanging up, Arthur sat heavily on the sofa, the weight of responsibility falling on his shoulders. It wasn't just a matter of caring for 4 orphaned children. He had become the guardian of evidence that could dismantle a criminal network, and that made him and the children potential targets. "Arthur," Beatrice said, touching his shoulder, "maybe we should think about leaving town for a while until this situation is resolved." "Run away?" Amelia had overheard the conversation. "Are we going to have to run away again?" "No, little one," Arthur said firmly, picking her up. "We're not running away. We're going to fight." "How?" "By doing what your mother planned, handing this information to the right detective and making sure the bad people are punished once and for all." Beatrice nodded. "The children have suffered enough. It's time to end this." "But what if the bad people try to hurt us?" Amelia asked, her small voice revealing the fear she still carried. "Then we'll protect ourselves," Arthur replied. "We'll call good people to help us, and we'll make sure you stay safe while we do the right thing." At that moment, David appeared in the room, carrying Jude. "Can I play a song?" he asked. "Not now, David," Beatrice said. "We're talking about important things." "That's why I want to play. Our mother always said music chased away bad thoughts." Arthur smiled despite the tension. "Play then, my son." David went to the piano and began to play a melody none of them had heard before. It was soft yet strong, melancholic yet hopeful. As the music echoed through the house, everyone felt a strange calm wash over them. "What song is that?" Beatrice asked. "Our mother composed it for when we were scared," David explained, still playing. "She said that when we played it, she would be protecting us, even if she wasn't here." And at that moment, as Claire's music filled the house, they all felt they were doing the right thing. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The meeting with Detective Frank Riley was set for the next morning at a discreet cafe in downtown Cedar Creek. Arthur arrived accompanied by Beatrice and Dr. Vance, carrying a briefcase with copies of Claire's journal and other documents they had found. The children stayed at home under the care of Carmen and 2 security guards Dr. Raphael had recommended. The detective was a man in his late 40s, with graying hair and eyes that reflected years of investigating complex crimes. When he introduced himself, it was clear he was very familiar with the situation. "Mr. Morgan," he said, shaking Arthur's hand, "Claire told me a lot about you. She was sure you would be the right person to protect these children. You knew my wife personally. For about 6 months, she was our main informant on the child exploitation network in the region." The detective sat down and opened his own folder. "The work she did was crucial to our investigation, but unfortunately she didn't live to see the results." Beatrice leaned forward. What results? In the last few months, we've managed to dismantle 4 irregular institutions in the state and identify more than 20 people involved in the scheme. The detective paused, but the ringleaders are still free. And who are these ringleaders? Dr. Vance asked. Mainly a local businessman named Rudolph Sinclair, who used his construction companies as a front to move dirty money, and a former city employee, Marcia Oliver, who facilitated the creation of false documents for illegal adoptions. Arthur's stomach turned. He knew Rudolph Sinclair personally. The man had tried to form business partnerships with Morgan Equipment on several occasions. As for Marcia, Beatrice knew her from the city's social circles. That's why you were being watched, the detective continued. Sinclair found out the children had been placed with you and was trying to find a way to get them back before they could testify. Testify about what exactly? Beatrice asked. About things they saw at St. Vincent's Institution. Mainly about late-night visits from important people, about children who were taken away and never came back. The detective looked directly at Arthur. Your adopted children witnessed meetings where the market value of different children was openly discussed. The revelation left everyone in silence. The idea that Amelia, David, Laura, and Jude had been exposed to conversations about selling children was sickening. Do they know the children saw these meetings? Dr. Vance asked. Not only do they know, but they know Amelia has a photographic memory. The girl can remember names, faces, entire conversations. The detective opened a photo in his folder. For example, she was able to identify this person in a session with our specialized psychologist. The photograph showed a well-dressed, middle-aged man whom Arthur immediately recognized as the deputy mayor of a neighboring town. My God, he murmured, the network is bigger than we imagined. Much bigger, and for that very reason, much more dangerous. The detective put the photo away. That's why we need to act quickly. The longer these children are exposed, the greater the risk that they will try something drastic to silence them. Something drastic like what? Beatrice asked, though she feared the answer. Kidnapping attempts, fabricated accidents, even attempts to publicly discredit you so that the children are legally removed from your custody. Arthur felt a chill. What can we do? First, we're going to increase the security around your family. Second, we're going to speed up the process of collecting the children's testimonies. Third, the detective hesitated. We're going to need you to consider a temporary change of address. Leave Cedar Creek, Beatrice asked, for a few weeks until we can arrest the main individuals involved. We have a safe house in a smaller town where you would be under 24-hour police protection. Arthur thought of the children who had finally found stability and would now have to face another move. And after, if you manage to arrest these people, afterward, you can return to a normal life. The children will be safe and the nightmare will be over. Dr. Vance spoke up. Detective, what's the timeline for these arrests? If all goes well, 2 weeks at most. We're just waiting for some final court orders. And if something goes wrong? The detective's silence was answer enough. When they returned home, they found a scene that momentarily reassured them. The children were in the garden, playing under the watchful supervision of the security guards. Amelia was teaching Laura how to make flower crowns, while David pushed Jude on a small swing that Carmen had improvised. How was the meeting? Carmen asked when they came in. Complicated, Arthur replied. We're going to need to talk to the children about a trip. That afternoon, Arthur gathered all the children in the living room for a difficult conversation. How to explain to children who had already suffered so much that they would have to move again, even if temporarily. Children, he began carefully, do you remember how Mommy Claire wrote that notebook to protect you and other children? Yes, Amelia replied, to arrest the bad people. Exactly. Well, now the time has come to use that information, but to do it safely, we're going to need to stay in a different house for a few weeks. Far from here? David asked, clearly worried. Not too far, and it would only be temporary until the bad people are arrested. Laura approached Beatrice and climbed into her lap. Is Auntie Beatrice coming with us? Of course I am, my dear. We're a family now, and families stay together. Amelia, always the most perceptive, asked the question they all feared. And what if the bad people try to find us at the new house? Arthur knelt to her level. That's why we'll have police officers protecting us. Good police officers. Like the detective who's going to arrest the bad people. Like Dr. Raphael. Exactly like Dr. Raphael. At that moment, the phone rang. Carmen answered and returned with a worried expression. Mr. Morgan, it's from Amelia's school. The principal wants to talk to you urgently. About what? She wouldn't say over the phone, but she asked you to go there today. Arthur and Beatrice exchanged worried glances. The timing of the call was too suspicious to be a coincidence. I'll go, Beatrice said. If it's some kind of trap, it's better if you stay here with the children. No, we'll go together, but we'll take the children and the guards. An hour later, the whole family was at the private school where Amelia had been studying for only 3 weeks. The principal, Mrs. Campbell, received them in her office with an extremely serious expression. Mr. Morgan, we had a very strange visit today. 2 men introduced themselves as social workers and asked very specific questions about Amelia. What kind of questions? Arthur asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. About her behavior in class, if she talked about her past, if she mentioned names of people or specific places. The principal paused. But what worried me most was that they had information about Amelia that isn't on our registration form. What information? They knew she had lived in an institution before coming to live with you. They even knew details about her younger siblings that were never mentioned here. Beatrice turned to Amelia, who was sitting next to David in a nearby chair. Amelia, did you tell anyone at school about where you used to live? The girl shook her head. No, you said not to talk about it. Mr. Morgan, the principal said, I think someone is investigating your family, and I don't think they're official people. Arthur felt the net closing in. Claire's plan was working. The information was reaching the right authorities. The criminal network was being dismantled. But it also meant that the criminals were desperate and willing to do anything to protect their secrets. The war had officially begun, and the children who had suffered so much were once again at the center of a battle that could determine not only their future, but that of dozens of other children still in the hands of the exploiters. The move to the safe house happened the next morning, under discreet police escort. The property was in a small town 2 hours from Cedar Creek, hidden among hills covered in eucalyptus trees. It was a renovated farmhouse, simple but comfortable, with a large yard where the children could play under constant supervision. For the first few days, the family tried to maintain a normal routine. Arthur worked remotely via computer, while Beatrice handled the children's education with books and activities they had brought. Carmen had insisted on accompanying them, claiming that these children have suffered too many separations in their lives. But on the 4th night, something happened that changed everything. Amelia woke up in the middle of the night screaming. It wasn't just a common nightmare. She was in total panic, repeating names Arthur recognized from Claire's journal. Mr. Sinclair can't take me. I don't want to go with Mr. Sinclair, she screamed, while Arthur tried to calm her down. Beatrice ran to the room, followed by the other 3 siblings who had woken up with the screams. Amelia, my dear, it's just a dream, Beatrice said gently. You're safe here with us. It's not a dream, Amelia insisted, still trembling. I remembered. I remembered the night Mr. Sinclair came to the institution and chose children to take away. Arthur sat on the edge of the bed. Can you tell me about that night? In a voice broken by sobs, Amelia began to recount a memory that had been blocked by trauma. It was very late and we were supposed to be sleeping. But David had a fever and I went to find someone to help. When I got to the hallway, I saw lights in the director's office. And then I hid behind the door and saw Mr. Sinclair with a briefcase full of money. He was looking at photos of children and choosing which ones he wanted to take. David, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. I remember too. He looked at my picture and said that boys who know music are worth more money. The horror of the revelation left the adults speechless. The children hadn't just witnessed meetings about exploitation, they had witnessed a veritable human trafficking fair. Why did you never tell us this before? Beatrice asked, trying to control the emotion in her voice. Because we were scared, Amelia replied simply. In the institution, when children talked about those meetings, they would disappear the next day. Arthur hugged the 4 children, feeling the weight of the responsibility he carried. These weren't just traumatic memories. They were evidence of heinous crimes that could put dozens of criminals in prison. The next morning, Detective Riley arrived, accompanied by a psychologist specializing in child testimony. Dr. Anna Beatriz was a young woman with a soft voice who immediately gained the children's trust. Amelia, she said, sitting on the floor of the living room next to the children, can you draw me what you remember from that night? As Amelia drew, David approached the house's piano. Beatrice had insisted on bringing an instrument so he wouldn't lose his practice. Can I play the song the man asked me to learn? He asked. What man? Dr. Anna Beatriz asked, immediately attentive. Mr. Sinclair. He said if I learned to play beautiful songs, a rich family would adopt me. The detective and the psychologist exchanged significant looks. It was becoming clear that the scheme was even more elaborate than they had imagined. It wasn't just about neglect or abuse, but a veritable catalogue of children with special skills being sold to specific buyers. David, can you play that song? Dr. Anna Beatriz asked. The boy began to play a complex and melancholic melody. For a 3-year-old, the execution was extraordinary, but there was something disturbing in the technical perfection, as if he had been forced to practice under pressure. How did you learn to play like that? The psychologist asked gently. The teacher at the institution taught me every day. He said if I didn't play right, I wouldn't be able to stay with my siblings. The revelation that the children were trained to be more marketable added a new layer of horror to the situation. Arthur had to leave the room to keep from crying in front of the children. Beatrice found him in the yard, leaning against a tree, struggling with his emotions. How could they do this to babies? He murmured. Jude was only 3 months old when he got there. 3 months! We don't know what Jude went through because he was still too young to remember, Beatrice said, trying to offer some comfort. Maybe he was spared the worst. And what if he wasn't? What if there are things we can't even imagine? At that moment, Carmen appeared at the back door with an urgent expression. Mr. Morgan, the detective wants to talk to you, urgently. When they returned inside, they found Detective Riley on the phone with someone, his voice tense and low. When he hung up, his expression was grave. We have a problem, he said. Rudolph Sinclair has disappeared. Our team went to arrest him this morning, but the house was empty. It seems he was tipped off. Does that mean he knows where we are? Beatrice asked, alarmed. Not necessarily, but it means our window of time is closing. The detective addressed the children. Children, we're going to need you to be very brave and help us make sure Mr. Sinclair gets arrested. How? Amelia asked. By telling us everything you remember about him. Every detail, every conversation you heard, every person you saw with him. Dr. Anna Beatriz knelt beside the children. Are you willing to help other boys and girls who are still in danger? The four children looked at each other and, in a gesture that moved all the adults present, held hands. "We're in," Amelia said, speaking for everyone, "but only if we stay together." "Always together," the detective promised. Over the next few hours, the children reported details that gradually painted a terrifying picture of the criminal operation. There was an international network of buyers specializing in different types of children. Some wanted babies for fraudulent adoptions. Others sought children with specific skills, musicians, dancers, exceptionally intelligent children, for purposes no one wanted to imagine. "There are lists," Amelia said during her testimony, "lists with photos and descriptions of the children, as if we were pets." "Did you see these lists?" Dr. Anna Beatrice asked. "I did. My picture was there, and my siblings. It said things like, intelligent girl, good memory, and musical prodigy boy." Arthur felt sick. His children's own special qualities, Amelia's intelligence, David's musical talent, had been catalogued as commercial products. "Amelia," the detective said carefully, "do you remember anyone else who visited the institution to choose children?" The girl closed her eyes, concentrating. "There was a very elegant lady who always came with Mr. Sinclair. She talked differently, like she was from another country." "Different how?" "With a weird accent, and she always looked at the babies a lot." Dr. Anna Beatrice made careful notes. "Anyone else?" "There was a man who drove a very big black car. He always took the older kids, especially the boys." And the revelations continued for hours, each detail adding more evidence to the investigation. But it also became clear that the network was international and extremely well organized. When the testimony sessions ended, it was already late at night. The children were exhausted, but there was a visible relief on their faces, as if they had finally managed to unload a burden they had been carrying for months. "Are the bad people going to be arrested now?" Laura asked, using one of the few complete sentences she could speak. "We'll do everything we can to make that happen," the detective promised. But that same night, while the family slept under police protection, Rudolph Sinclair was in an emergency meeting with his associates, planning one last desperate attempt to recover the only witnesses who could completely destroy his operation. The final confrontation was approaching, and this time there would be no avoiding it. 6 months after the testimonies at the safe house, the Morgan family was back in the mansion on Grand Oak Avenue. But now the house was different, not just because of the toys scattered around the rooms or the piano that played daily, but because of the energy of life and hope that filled every space. The police operation had been a complete success. Rudolph Sinclair was arrested in a desperate attempt to flee the country, along with Marcia Oliver and 16 other members of the criminal network. The investigations revealed an operation that had been running for over a decade, involving hundreds of children and millions of dollars in illegal transactions. On that sunny December morning, Arthur was in the garden watching a scene he never got tired of seeing. Amelia, now 5, patiently teaching Laura to read, using colorful books Beatrice had bought. David was playing the piano in the living room, preparing for his first official recital at a city music school. And Jude, almost 2 years old, was running around the yard chasing butterflies with a joy that warmed everyone's hearts. "Daddy Arthur," Amelia called, running up to him, "can you come see something important?" She led him to the living room, where a surprise awaited him. Dr. Raphael was sitting on the sofa, smiling, accompanied by 2 other children, a boy of about 7 and a girl of 5. "Arthur," Dr. Raphael said, standing up, "I want to introduce you to Charles and Marina. They were rescued from the same network as your children." The 2 children were visibly nervous, clinging to Dr. Raphael's hands. But Amelia immediately approached them, with the naturalness she had learned to show with people who had suffered similar experiences. "Hi," she said gently. "Are you scared? We were too when we first got here, but this is a good place." "It's true," David confirmed, stopping his piano playing to join the group. "No one will hurt you here." Dr. Raphael explained that Charles and Marina were siblings who had been found in one of the institutions closed after the arrests. Their parents had died in an accident, and they had no known family. For the past few months, they had been in a temporary foster home, but it was clear they needed a more stable family environment. "Why did you bring them here?" Arthur asked, though deep in his heart he already knew the answer. "Because you've proven you can turn trauma into love, fear into hope, and because—" Dr. Raphael smiled. "Amelia called me yesterday specifically asking to meet other children who had been through the same situation." Arthur looked at Amelia, surprised. "You called Dr. Raphael?" "I did, because I have an idea." Amelia positioned herself in the center of the room with the seriousness of someone much older. "We could help other children who are still sad and scared." Beatrice, who had appeared in the room drawn by the voices, sat in a nearby armchair. "What kind of help, my dear?" "We could create a place here at home for children who don't have a family to stay for a little while, until they find a forever family, like you did with us." The 5-year-old's proposal left all the adults in silence. It was an idea both simple and profound, to transform the house that had been a refuge for 4 children into a true temporary home for others who needed one. "It would be like a big family," David continued, clearly having already discussed it among the siblings, "with lots of kids, but everyone taking care of each other. And we could teach them that not everything in the world is bad," added Laura, with her still small but firm voice. Arthur looked at Beatrice, seeing the same emotion in her eyes that he felt in his own chest. For all these months, he had wondered what the next step would be, how to fully honor Claire's memory and the sacrifice she had made. "Dr. Raphael," he said finally, "what would it take to make this idea a reality?" "Legal documentation, approval from the competent authorities, adapting the house to receive more children," the psychologist replied. "But most importantly, are you sure this is what you want? It would be a huge responsibility." "Bigger than the responsibility we already have?" Beatrice asked, gesturing to the 4 children who had completely changed their lives. Carmen, who had been listening from the kitchen door, approached. "If I may say so, I think this house was always meant to be full of children. Since they arrived, I've never seen Mr. Arthur and Mrs. Beatrice so happy." At that moment, a memory came clearly to Arthur's mind, a conversation he had had with Claire months before she passed, when she had vaguely mentioned a dream of helping children who needed a second chance. At the time, he had thought she was referring to sporadic volunteer work. Now he understood she was planting a seed for something much larger. "Claire planned this too, didn't she?" he asked Dr. Raphael. "Not in the specific details, but she always said you were the kind of people who couldn't be happy knowing there were other children suffering when you had the means to help." Charles, who had remained quiet throughout the conversation, finally spoke. "Would you adopt us too?" The direct question, asked with the raw vulnerability of childhood, touched all the hearts present. "If you want to stay with us, of course," Arthur replied, kneeling to the boy's level. "But even if you decide you want a family just for the 2 of you, we will still help you find the right place." Marina, the younger sister, looked around the house, observing the toys, the family photographs, the general feeling of love that permeated the environment. "Is there a piano here?" she asked shyly. "There is," David replied excitedly, "and I can teach you how to play." "And is there a place to draw?" "There's a whole room just for drawing," Amelia said. "Auntie Beatrice made it for us, but we share it with everyone." Gradually, Charles and Marina began to open up, exploring the house, asking questions, starting to imagine what it would be like to live there. And gradually, all the adults realized it was no longer a decision they needed to make. It was something that was already happening naturally. 3 hours later, as Dr. Raphael was preparing to leave, Charles ran up to him. "Dr. Raphael, can we stay? Forever?" "If Mr. Arthur and Mrs. Beatrice agree." "We agree," Beatrice said immediately, speaking for both herself and Arthur. "Of course we agree." That night, after all 6 children were asleep, Charles and Marina in the guest rooms that were quickly transformed into permanent bedrooms, Arthur and Beatrice sat in the garden, watching the stars. "Can you believe what our life has become?" Beatrice asked. "I never imagined I would lose 1 son and gain 6, Arthur replied. "Or that I would discover I'm capable of loving so many children at the same time." "Claire knew," Beatrice said with conviction. Somehow, she knew exactly how all of this would end. The following month, the papers for the official creation of Clare House, a family foster home, were filed. The mansion on Grand Oak Avenue was renovated to accommodate up to 12 children, with large bedrooms, study rooms, and most importantly, plenty of space to play and be a child. Dr. Raphael became the official psychologist for the house, visiting weekly to monitor each new child's adaptation. Carmen expanded her team to include 2 other caregivers, but maintained her central role as the grandma to all the children, and Beatrice discovered her true calling. Coordinating the administrative and educational side of the house, she finally found a way to channel all her energy and intelligence into something that deeply fulfilled her. 6 months after the creation of Clare House, during Amelia's birthday party, Arthur found himself watching a scene that perfectly summed up his new life, 12 children of different ages playing in the garden, some of whom had arrived traumatized and scared, now laughing and running with the naturalness of a real family. David was at the piano, playing for a small audience of younger children who sang along. Amelia was organizing a treasure hunt for the older ones. Laura was taking care of the babies with a maternal dedication impressive for a 3-year-old. And Jude, now 2.5, was officially the class clown, making everyone laugh with his antics. "Claire would be proud," Dr. Raphael said, approaching Arthur. "She would. And I think I finally understand what her full plan was." Arthur smiled, watching Beatrice distribute pieces of cake with the loving patience of an experienced mother. She didn't just want to save her 4 children. She wanted to create a way to save all the children who would come after. And you succeeded. No, we've only just begun. Because now I know this will go on forever. Every child who passes through here will carry a piece of this experience forward. And when they grow up, they will help other children too. At that moment, Amelia ran up to Arthur, followed by all the other children from the house. "Daddy Arthur," she said, breathless from playing, "we made a song for you and Auntie Beatrice. David composed it and we made up the words." "A song? About our family. Want to hear it?" Arthur nodded, and all 12 children arranged themselves in an improvised line. David began to play a simple but beautiful melody, and the children sang. "Our house is made of love. Our family grew with care. No matter where we came from, here we are all children. Mommy Claire brought us here. Daddy Arthur took us in. Auntie Beatrice taught us that everyone deserves a home of their own." When they finished, there wasn't a dry eye among the adults present. It was a simple song made by children, but it perfectly captured the essence of what they had built together. That night, after all the children were asleep, Arthur visited Peter's grave for the first time in months. But this time, it wasn't to mourn a loss. It was to share a victory. "Peter, my son," he said, kneeling before the headstone, "I don't know if you can hear me, but I want you to know that your stepmother, Claire, did something incredible. She turned our pain into hope for so many children, and I think you'd be happy to know that you now have 12 siblings who would love to meet you." A gentle breeze blew through the cypress trees, and Arthur smiled, feeling for the first time in years that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was supposed to do. The story that had begun with the suffering of 4 abandoned children had transformed into the creation of a legacy of love that would continue to help children for generations. And somewhere, in the memories that persist beyond life, Claire smiled, knowing her sacrifice had been worth it. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.